Hey everybody, my name is Holly Martins. I'm a licensed real estate agent here in the Garden State, and I'm sitting today with Maimoon Mustafa in his office in Wayne. So Maimoon, you practice real estate law, and we've done a fair amount of transactions together. I always advocate to my buyers and sellers that they need an attorney for representation. Why do you think it's important?
Well, first and foremost, I think not having an attorney is crazy to me, and not only because I'm an attorney. First, my first transaction I ever had prior to ever even considering being a lawyer was in, I believe, is in 1999. And I just thought to myself, yeah, I need an attorney. I don't know anything about the contract. I don't understand it. I can't really read it. A lot of legal jargon in there. So I felt it was important to have representation. Something I didn't understand that it was an enormous transaction. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of liability. A lot of things can go wrong. So not having a professional trained and licensed to understand what you're getting into, to me is not a very brilliant idea. Yeah. It's actually poor judgment if you decide to purchase a home and not have an attorney represent you. And I know that I'm biased, but I tried to give you the non-biased side because I did it when I wasn't an attorney. I had representation. So I just think it just doesn't make sense to, most people, it's the biggest transaction of their lives, and to not have someone who understands it and can explain it to them and protect them and also take on all the liability it's just not a good business decision, because we obviously absolve some of the liability that can happen. If something goes wrong, it comes back to us.
Right.
You too, as well as a licensed realtor.
Yeah.
Can make a mistake and they could blame you for it. So.
Right. Where are the barriers between the liability and the clients that we're protecting?
Right.
So we usually do a lot of hand-holding for buyers as they prepare to go and buy a house. We're always forewarning them of the processes in the transaction, things to look out for, how all of us are there to support them and get them across the finish line and advocate for them. But I feel like sometimes with sellers, we don't do as much of the prep in that regard. So if somebody's getting ready to sell their house, what are things that you would want them to know before they actually get to that point?
Well, yeah, whenever I have a consultation with a seller, sellers are really funny. They just care about the bottom line. I'm sure that's what you see as well.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to know, how much am I making? A lot of times when I have that consultation, they ask me, how much am I going to get at the end of this? What are my costs? What are my expenses? So we do have that conversation with them. We can give them a rough estimate of their costs. But some of the things that we also talk about are mortgages. I've had many deals where there's a second mortgage that they're not even aware of, believe it or not. And that could come in where sometimes, dating back to 10, 15 years ago, loan modifications were like popular in around 2007 and 6. So what happened a lot of times is people just wanted to keep their homes and did whatever they needed to do to keep the home. And one of the options that they had out there was loan mods, but they probably didn't have an attorney represent them in the loan mod. They signed documents, and suddenly you have this second lien on the house that they thought was, gone. They thought it would just disappeared because they kept the home. But what happened was, years back, they would just add a second lien to the home for the deficiency, the amount that they were behind. So we talk to them about mortgages. We talk to them about judgments. A lot of times people don't even know that they have judgments. Could be like a doctor's bill, it could be a credit card where they took it to a collection agency and they file a judgment. It could be a bunch of things that are entitled that they're not aware of. So we try to have a conversation about some of those things. Sometimes they know and they'll tell us about it, so we get a jump start on it. Another popular one is child support. That also is something that can prevent you from closing if you have a lot of arrears or if you're behind and not paying. Sometimes people have a ton of arrears, but they're paying, so that could play out a little differently as well. So there's a lot of things that the sellers are not aware of that we try to bring to their attention in case sometimes they get a little upset about these questions.
Or they suddenly realize they are owing money.
You're a deadbeat dad. I'm just asking you if you have any child support. So
yeah, and it's better to get ahead of it than have it come up in a title search when you're halfway through the transaction and we've got this catastrophe we've got to handle.
I've had that happen a lot where you find out things, very late in the game, where whether the other side orders title, because when you're on the seller side, you're kind of on the receiving end of stuff, they may order title very late in the process, and then I get the title and I'm like, uh-oh, I got a lot of work to do.
Right.
It happens a lot.
We had that own situation with our buyer. We found out that the property they were planning on purchasing had millions of dollars in arrears, like millions of dollars in judgments.
Millions, yes, several millions. And I immediately reached out to you and said, uh-oh,
Right.
this doesn't look good. These millions don't just go away. It's not that simple.
Yeah, it's not a medical bill.
People think that you just file a bankruptcy and you're okay. The bankruptcy releases you. It doesn't always release the assets. So that's what happened in this scenario. I guess they're petitioning back to release the property. So if they can, then maybe we'll come back to the table on that one.
So we've all had our crazy story. Like we all have that one story in the industry that's going to live in our brain for the rest of our lives, regardless of how long we're outside of our careers. Like I certainly have mine. I've done a whole series of reels on them. But what's your craziest moment as a real estate attorney?
Yeah, I mean, this one, I've had a lot of crazy, but this one really stands out. So I represent, and it's in fact, it's still 4 years later, and I haven't finished closing these. So it's two transactions. It's a commercial property and then a residential property that my client came into my office 4 years ago and asked, hey, I want to sell these properties. Can you help me? Sure. I was like, oh, 2 deals in one. This is great. So we went under contract, and it took like 4 or 5 months. The contract fell apart. The buyer couldn't, get a mortgage. And this was years ago, obviously 4 years ago. It's a little different. The buyer couldn't get a mortgage. Deal fell apart. We went under contract on another deal. It also fell apart. And now, mind you, I don't have title on these yet, either of them.
Right, you haven't gotten that far down the road.
Yeah, so it was just, they were trying to get their mortgage. Some attorneys wait to get, the mortgage before they order title. It happened to be, in those 2 cases, they didn't order title. So the third deal, we finally have a mortgage approval. We get title. They order a survey. The survey comes back, and the attorney calls me and says, there's a problem. I said, uh-oh. So the survey showed that my client's property, like I would say about 15 to 20% of the commercial property is sitting on someone else's land.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, so that's definitely not good. What's worse is my client actually owned that land at one point and sold it to someone. And that transaction was not a very friendly transaction. They actually hated each other, which I found out later. So now my client, in order to sell the commercial property, has to basically purchase that 20% or 15% of that land from the neighbor that hates him. So obviously that wasn't going to go well for him. I know the attorneys that were involved, so I called the attorney and I said, hey, listen, we're gonna need to subdivide this land, which this guy doesn't even know it's his, and he's not even making use of it, and he can never make use of it because my client's property is actually on it. So it's not like he can chop off the property and use it.
He might as well just sell it at that point.
He doesn't use it. It's of no use to him. So for him, it's a win, obviously. So the attorney says, hey, this guy's gonna want big money. So I tell my client, I'm like, you're gonna have to pay. I hope it's not a lot, but they're telling me big money. So I'm thinking it's at least gonna be $100,000 for this little piece of land that he has to purchase. Sure enough, it was $100,000. So my client's thinking, I'll give him 10 grand and get it because he's not using it. So it's $100,000. We end up subdividing the land. They negotiated a little less, so he got it for a little cheaper. We subdivided the land. It took forever. COVID happened. And so subdivisions and going into the town and getting approvals and, it's just a lot of work. It's
a lot of worst case scenarios.
A lot of worst case scenarios went into it. So we subdivided the land. We were able to purchase it. There was now that lot became 40. I know the numbers. It's sick that I know this stuff, but it's 49.1 and 49 are the lot numbers of this property. So we get through that, and now that buyer left already because he wasn't going to hang around and wait for the subdivision. It literally took almost 2 years. We go, now he says, well, I'm going to sell the commercial property separately. And I told him this, you should probably just sell them separately because now the market's different. It's a better market. The 2-family in Clifton, and it's in Clifton, is going to get you more than what we had it under contract for if you sell them separately. So it was like $850 for both, which was a really good price in 2000, 4 years ago, 18. So I said, you could probably sell the 2-family for $556 easily, and sell the commercial for like $8, and you make out, you get your 100 grand back. So he said, all right, let's do that. So we got the residential under contract. We actually just closed the residential
Oh, congratulations.
2 weeks ago. Yeah, but the commercial, so he was under contract with the commercial to sell it to one of the tenants who literally didn't even sign the contract for 6 months. And I'm telling my client, this guy hasn't put a deposit up. Why are you? And he's like, I just want to sell it to him. He's a nice guy. I'm like, but we don't even have a deposit. So we wasted 6 more months. He finally put that one on the market, found a buyer. And so we're ready to close 2 weeks ago. I get title, and now all the liens and things that are on the property he sold to the neighbor, the property, the part that he purchased from the neighbor, all his liens are still showing up on our title. So we couldn't close because
it's cursed.
The liens, the way liens work in mortgages is if you get a mortgage, I'm sure you've heard of these things, legal descriptions. So the legal description of that mortgage describes the entire property pre-subdivision. So when the title company does the search, they pick up everything on that property. So so now what happens is we have to, and this is the subdivision part, where there's an attorney that we worked with that did the subdivision. So we have to now get a partial lien from the mortgage company because their lien is on that 20%. So they have to release that 20% in order for us to sell. So that was the craziest story that I've had.
And it's
really,
ongoing.
Yeah, it's still going. It's 4
nightmare.
years. So when people come in here and they're stressed out, because I have, people are stressed out 3 months later, they haven't closed and they're freaking out.
Right, you have an interesting perspective.
4 years, try that. They're like, what? 4 years, how, who, what, when? Where I'm like, yeah, 4 years, literally 4 years. I have another one. I probably should tell you this because this is also very wild. So I had a deal in North Bergen. A guy owned a 2-family and we went to sell the property and we found out, like when the survey was done and when title came in, that he actually didn't own the property. He owned the next door property. I said, this is nuts. Yeah, he actually owned the wrong property and was operating as the owner for like 3 years.
Did he not know that he didn't
He
actually
didn't know,
own that property?
and neither did the neighbor that owned the other property who actually owned his property.
How did this happen?
So subdivision gone bad.
Wow.
Yes. So we ended up swapping properties in order to sell.
That's
so
insane.
I reached that probably might be even the crazier
story. That's like
story.
some Hudson County nonsense.
That's some Hudson County subdivision nonsense right there for sure. That subdivision's gone wrong. So we ended up contacting the owner of the neighboring property. He thought it was a scam because there's so many good scams out there.
Right.
Like, you don't own your property. I was like, just get me in touch with your attorney so I can explain to him. So he had his attorney contact me. I sent him the paperwork and he was like, you're right. I was like, yeah, I know. So here's the deal. We're gonna swap properties. And that's what we did. And then my client was able to sell.
It's like the premise for a really bad movie.
Yeah, look, it's important to, get surveys and I always push the surveys on people.
And we often have that conversation with buyers, like, no, it's not a requirement to buy the property to have a survey done, but you should do it because you don't want to inherit other problems.
It's just your last chance to find out if your property is
has somebody else's
encroaching
property
or there's
on it.
something else going on. And it's only like $750, $800. So as years have gone on, obviously you get wiser. I make people sign waivers when they don't want them anymore.
Yeah, because you don't want to be liable.
Because the liability again comes back to us. So I just think people should just follow our guidance because this is what we do. We know what we're doing. We're not just telling you to get a survey because it's going to benefit me. It's really for your own good. And then it makes sense because you're going to end up probably doing some work or putting a fence up or doing something, and it's just right there.
Or someday you're going to sell it.
Exactly.
And you don't want to suddenly be faced with an issue that could have been amended
for sure
under someone else's obligation.
As soon as you become the owner, it becomes your problem.
Yep. That's insane.
Yeah.
All right, so what are your favorite things, let's say, one favorite thing about being a real estate attorney and your most hated thing about being a real estate attorney?
Okay, well, the favorite is really easy. It's being a part of the person's, accomplishment. It's a huge accomplishment. A lot of dreams are happening in this office. We're part of that. Just to be a piece of the puzzle and helping people achieve their home ownership dreams or their dream home, because I've done that too. Or the investors. I also represent a ton of investors that, have made a lot of money with me. I have one client that literally I watched him he bought 2 properties side by side, like they were on the same block. I think there might have been one in between or they were next No, I think they were next to each other. He bought 2 properties, and he went and got approvals to build and do all this stuff with it, like to do a commercial multi-unit housing complex in Patterson. And he sold the plans, and I helped him make $1 million on this project.
That's fantastic.
He made $1 million. So it was awesome to see him make $1 million right in front of my eyes. So that's the most rewarding part of this, just being a part of that. And a lot of the clients, they always remember you. They say such nice things. They come back, they refer their friends, their family. So it's a pretty rewarding thing. As opposed to a lot of areas of the law where the attorneys are part of such bad things for people.
Yeah.
In this part of the world, it's just, we're a part of the happiness. So it's a good thing to experience. And the worst thing about this practice is the communication of so many people. Starting with the attorney. For all the attorneys out there that don't communicate, you should probably practice somewhere else. This is not the place to practice. Real estate is not for you. And there's a lot of attorneys that do real estate, unfortunately, and don't like to communicate, don't know how to reply all, copy their clients in the correspondence. It caused me nightmares when their clients are sending me messages, or sometimes they're even talking shit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's true.
And I go, first of all, I can't say anything back to you. There's the rules of professional conduct that don't allow me to communicate directly to somebody with an attorney. But it's just really difficult. You see it all the time. I copy the realtors on the initial correspondence. I copy my paralegal, my admin, and there's a reason why I'm copying people, because people need to follow along with the transaction.
We're all cat herding together.
You need to know what's going on. Did the deposit go out? Are the inspection reports in? Because if you don't know what's going on, then I have to tell you, she has to tell you, somebody's got to communicate that to you. That's just taking extra time out of our already busy days.
It's a lot easier for somebody to drop the ball too if we're not all on the same page all the time.
There are times when you or some other realtor has said, hey, Maimoon, did you get this out? And I may have not, and that's a reminder to me. Hey, let me get this out. She just gave me that quick reminder that I needed, and we do that. So it's just, it requires a lot of communication. A lot of the attorneys don't know how to reply all. Some realtors don't either, which I don't want to absolve them from any of this.
We're perfect when you talk about.
Some of the realtors do it. Some of the realtors are just like really bad with the communication. And copying the clients in is just, I know it's less work when you copy your clients. You blind copy them or CC them or whatever.
It's not helpful though.
It's not helpful. It always leads to something that's unnecessary. It leads to confusion. But they do it because it's the lazy way. Yeah. So for us, every time I send out a communication, I'm sending it to my client in a separate thread. Right. Like, here's what's going on, just to keep you posted. And so it's an extra step, but I think it's necessary.
It's an important safeguard.
Yeah, that's the probably the worst part of this business. Yeah. So
if there was one thing that you could do to make real estate law or the practice of it, maybe overall or just the day-to-day minutia, if you could do one thing to make things better, what would it be?
Eliminate all the non-professional people in this business. That's the truth.
Just cutting them all off at the
knees. There's a ton of agents very bad at what they do, and then because I can tell the difference because I've worked with the good ones. The good ones are just so on point, and they make my job. It's already a difficult job to get you from a contract to the keys into the closing table. But when you're dealing with like some of the professionals in this business that, and it's not just the newbies either, it's others. For example, I know it's not the realtor's job to tell the client to get an oil tank sweep. Although every good realtor I work with talks about these things when they're doing inspections. So I had a deal recently, and you're gonna publish this, he's probably gonna see this, but it is what it is. So he's a very experienced realtor. They do the inspections, I get no reports, I don't know what happened, so I reach out to the client and the agent, hey, what happened with the inspections? We're like 2 weeks late. Did you finish the inspections? Where are the reports? So I'm told by the agent, we worked it out. We got a $10,000 credit and all is like beautiful. I'm like, great, you got a $10,000 credit. Can I have the reports, at least for my record? Let me see what happened. Did you do an oil tank sweep? Silence. So now, for those that don't know, the oil tank sweep is the most important inspection. Well, getting a tank out of the ground, an old abandoned oil tank, it costs about $2,000. It's not a really big ordeal. Where it can get really sticky, as you know, is if the tank leaked, and a lot of times they did leak, and the soil's contaminated, and now you have to deal with, you know, environmental laws and stuff like that, and clean up the soil, and that can get very expensive. I've seen it.
And it's very time consuming.
Time consuming and super costly. I've seen it, you know, in the 6 figures before. That's rare, but I've seen it, and we always have to watch out for the worst case scenario. So he worked this out, he got the 10 grand, and the client was super happy. And I'm like, but you didn't do the most important inspection. Now, that puts me in a bad spot. I don't want to badmouth anyone. He's your realtor, he helped you find the property, but how could you do the inspections without doing the most important inspection? It's like 101 of inspections. Yes, I understand it's not your role, but then if you're gonna take the role of doing everything and working it out.
Right, if he's working out a seller's concession, which is your job, then he should also be.
And I don't mind when realtors work out, negotiate a credit or a settlement of an issue. It actually helps us, and we'll put the pieces together. We'll finalize it and make sure contractually we have it. But that's just something that really is a pet peeve of mine, is people just doing the wrong work. Also with the contracts, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a contract where the person's name is misspelled. And now I get it. Sometimes the name is misspelled and the buyer or the seller will still sign the contract that way. We can't expect our clients to actually even read this stuff. They don't. Especially when you send the DocuSign, just sign here. It's so confusing.
Right, they're doing it on their phone
it's
while
so
they're in line at
confusing.
Starbucks.
First of all, it's like, and they're doing it and it's done. So get the names right. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a contract where the mortgage is wrong and the deposit numbers are off and all the numbers are just off. It's just so much extra work for us. It's not like heavy lifting, but it's just extra unnecessary work. Just do the right work. And then you have lenders who are horrible, right? You've been there before. A horrible lender that puts you behind the 8 ball and you can't do anything. There's nothing I can do when the lender's bad and doesn't know how to get a loan cleared. So, and it just puts everyone behind the 8 ball on the buyer side. And then the sellers, I've been on this side of a seller where I don't have any answers for that.
Yeah, because you're just watching the circus on the other side.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Good lenders, good realtors, good attorneys. This is a hard business, but it's just so much harder when you have partners in the transaction that aren't very good.
Yeah. We're always advising that, you know, buyers have home inspections done. You're buying something that's incredibly expensive. It's most of the time their first home or their primary residence, and it's the biggest purchase they're making. And if they don't do a home inspection, they don't know what they're buying. In a market where it's very competitive, we're waiving a lot of the inspection language, not meaning we're not going to do an inspection, but we're not asking for repairs or credits based on our findings. You know, that said, I believe that it's a critical component of the process. I'm sure you would agree with that, but can you explain a little bit about why home inspections are important regarding, you know, overall homes, like radon, oil tanks, and everything in that subject?
Yeah, I mean, if you're spending, you know, nowadays, all the properties are $500,000 and up for the most part. It's a lot of money. It's a big investment. And you want to know what you're buying. That's first. It really isn't about negotiating a credit or getting something back. It's more for your knowledge, really, is the most important part of it. Because every home that I have never, and I'm thousands of transactions in, I have never seen a clean home inspection report. Ever.
Even new construction, there's going to be something.
Even new construction, because what happens is you have 2 contractors, for example. Bring a contractor in that did this work, and then bring another guy that came in here and that didn't do the work. He's going to look at this and find faults where the other guy wouldn't. So it's the same thing with the home inspector. They're always going to find, because it's somewhat, some of it is opinionated too. It's not even fact. Some of it is fact, some of it is opinion. But a lot of what happens in the home inspection report is they're telling you in advance of what could potentially be a problem too. So for you as a homeowner, it's good to actually have that knowledge. All right, my roof is 20 years old. It's not leaking right now, but I may need to prepare to change my roof in 3 years, 5 years. I want to know that, and that's the time to know. Now, on the other end, as a seller, if the roof is not leaking, I definitely don't want to change it because of some life expectancy of the roof. So as a seller's attorney, we always carve out that exception. So
where age is not a defect.
Age is not a defect, no matter how old something is. I've seen boilers that are 100 years old and they're still working.
Yeah.
Right. So, but getting back to the buyer's perspective of why you need a home inspection, it's really to tell you what's wrong, because even if you can't object, I still want to know. The dangerous part there is some of them want to get out of the deal when they find out. And if you really negotiated that you can't, and there's very few deals where I have where they completely waive the inspection. If they do that, let's say you have a client and you can't get the deal, and you say, hey, the way I can get this deal is we waive inspection. I don't like it, I don't want to do it, but do you really want the house that bad? We'll try it. And then they waive inspection. When they come to me, I'm going to make them sign stuff. I'm going to definitely explain to them what that means. What I say to everyone is the one inspection I would never waive is the oil tanks. The other stuff, if I have to, most of the stuff you see with the naked eye, you know if you have to repair a bathroom or if the kitchen needs to be updated, you could kind of see the stuff. But like if there's electrical problems, if there's plumbing problems, you kind of know what that's going to cost you anyway. It's not like, you don't have to spend 50 grand in electrical.
Right. It's not a huge.
If you had to change the whole panel and redo it, it might cost you 10 grand, 12 grand, whatever it is. So you kind of know where you end up if there's a problem. But the one thing that you really don't know is the oil tank. So that's the inspection that I would never, ever waive, unless they obviously gave us some proof that there is no tank. So then you don't have to do it. And even then, I'm still hesitant because there could be a second tank somewhere, and I've seen that.
Right, me too.
I've seen that, right? So that's the thing about it. I would definitely say you be careful what you can waive and what you can't. So you also have to be prepared to deal with stuff.
Right.
And it's just knowing that you're not getting a brand new house also. That's important because people think, the inspection. A lot of times I've had clients that kind of think the inspection is their chance to get the 10,000 that they put in extra. I'm going to get it back now. That's not what this is about. The inspection really isn't, and it works sometimes, but I want to set my expectations out front of what the home inspection is going to be like. It's probably not going to be good, but just be ready.
Yes. It's about what you can stomach at the end of the day. What are the things that they find that you're willing to work with, and what are the things that are going to truly terrify you?
Right. No, radon gas is bad. That's one that if it's high, but it's not it's a simple fix.
Yeah, you put in a remediation system.
There's tons of properties where I've seen remediation systems in there. Some people are like freaked out about that. Some people are freaked out about termites. You think about termites, you're like, oh my God, they're chewing the wood. And termite remediation is like $700 with a warranty.
And as long as there isn't a structural issue that's happened because of the termites, then you're looking at correction.
For sure. And there's very, very few really serious structural issues with properties. Like I may have seen it twice or 3 times where the structure is so bad that it's like a $70,000 fix. So,
and that's when people can have that, come to Jesus moment, so to speak, where they're saying like, dear seller, are you willing to do this repair? Are you willing to renegotiate the sale price? Or are we having our moment
if it's
where
really
we part
serious
ways?
and you provide them a structural engineer's report, the seller's got to take that seriously because there's no buyer that's going to deal with that. No matter how much they love your home, the buyer's not going to say, I'll take on the serious structural issue.
Right,
Don't
maybe
worry
the
about
floor
it.
won't cave in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And even with the oil tanks, I've got a ton of investors who I work with where we're saying we're buying the property completely as is because they're planning on knocking it down or doing a gut rehab on it, except for any underground storage tank that might be found, because that is still the non-negotiable.
Most of the investors want the tanks, want to know if there's a tank down there.
Yeah, they don't want to inherit that
I've
problem.
seen some that take the risk though. I've seen it. The deal has to be fantastic though.
Yeah.
Your numbers got to blow you away, and then you'll deal with it.
Right, because then they can afford that risk.
One of the things I've seen, and I've done this on my own personal deals, is I'll pay for the tank. I'll take the tank out. I'll pay for it. I just need to know if it's contaminated, and that's that. And sometimes they'll say, "Okay, you pay for it," and it's easier. It's an extra $1,500 with Tajir. I don't know if you know Tajir, but shout out to Tajir. He's a silver staff. He's really good. That's the guy I would recommend people use.
Excellent.
But so he always does a quick job, fast, and is pretty cost effective.
Good. So one of the things that we are writing in contractual language when we're putting an offer in is deposits. So normally there's your initial good faith deposit and then an additional deposit, and those more often than not are held in attorney's escrow. So the buyer is basically putting forth cash that's going to go toward the total purchase price of the home. But I've found that sometimes people just forget that the deposits are due.
They don't forget.
And we're chasing them around. So can you speak a little bit about
They
that?
don't forget. They don't forget. It's that buyers, like, they're a little afraid because it's serious when you have to put the money up. Like when you make an offer and your offer gets accepted and you sign a contract, sometimes it's not real yet, but when you have to put up 25 grand or whatever the deposit is, it's like I'll start to feel like they're really afraid. And I've had this conversation so many times. Your deposit is safe.
Yeah.
It's not going to go anywhere. Now, can an attorney be, doing cocaine and going to Las Vegas?
Don't do that.
They're out there. I've seen one do it to someone, and on a transaction I was involved in.
And that's when they get disbarred.
Yeah, he loses his license. Yes, that can happen to you, but we're not. You can get hit by a car on your way out, walking out of your house.
Well, I guess the big
don't
thing,
think about that.
The big thing to get people to understand is, like, it's a deposit, and
a
most of the
deposit.
time it's refundable if things
It's
go sideways.
refundable if you terminate the contract pursuant to one of the terms. The inspection contingency is not met, and you can't work out an agreement. The seller doesn't want to do what you lawfully can ask them to do, and they say no, because the seller is not going to be obligated to do anything, and you're not going to be, and I had this conversation many, you're not obligated to buy the home if things don't work out in the home inspection contingency. So if you say, let's say the roof is bad, and the roof is one of the things you can object to, and the seller says, I'm not changing the roof, take it or leave it, you can leave it and get your money back.
Yeah.
With a lot of other things. Or let's say your loan is denied and you can't get a mortgage, get your deposit back. But if you decide, I don't want to do this anymore, that's not,
that's not good enough.
You can't do that and expect your money back.
Yeah.
The money gets held in trust by the attorneys, and it'll be held until either a court order tells the attorney what to do or the parties reach an agreement. I've had deals where, clients breach, my own client, and also on the other end, they breach the contract. I hold the deposit, or the other attorney will hold the deposit until they work something out. Typically, people work it out, and the deposit, some of it will get released, some of it won't. Just had one the other day where we had a deal where the seller's attorney agreed to give 1 unit vacant on a 2-fam. They served the notice to quit, and the person never left. But they agreed to give us one of the units vacant. They shouldn't have agreed because they couldn't deliver. And so it was a breach of contract. My client was like, I'm done. I'm not going to wait, and I'm not going to take on the tenant because I got to
worry
move
about
in.
evictions.
I don't want. He didn't want to deal with that, and so they paid him to terminate the contract. And so he got some money, got his costs back, got his deposit back, and that was that. So yeah, deposits, people are sometimes afraid to give them, and it frustrates me because, again, we're chasing. We already told you, go back to the emails, read the emails, follow along, and we always tell them where the deposit needs to go, how much it is. We instruct them how to send it, make a copy of it. Some people are sending certified checks, although you don't have to unless it's specifically stated you do. And if you send a certified check as a deposit and you send it regular mail, you're asking for trouble, because a certified check, if it gets lost in the mail, you're not getting the money back in your account. Some banks I've seen take 6 months to refund the money. So, and we tell people, if it's certified, you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be, only at closing it has to be certified. But if you're gonna send a certified check, please spend the $20 and send it overnight.
Right.
Even less, send a certified mail, it's $7.
Or just go and drop it off.
Or you could take it to the attorney's office, for sure. So people overly complicate the deposit part, and we always have that conversation, especially when, some of them flat out ask you, what's gonna happen with my deposit? Like, it's okay. And then a lot of my seller clients, they wanna know that I have their deposit, right? Because sellers don't wanna deal with a buyer that doesn't put money up. So yeah, the deposit is an important one.
Tell me a little bit about the final walkthrough process. Like, when I bought my house, we did our final walkthrough to make sure that everything had been removed. It's supposed to be vacant, broom swept, and maybe they're leaving furniture behind that we agreed to inherit from them. We ended up in my house with at least a 30-yard dumpster worth of stuff that they just didn't take with them. I know what that's like. I know how annoying it is to resolve it. But I think that, generally speaking, a lot of buyers and sellers don't understand what broom swept means and why it's important to do a final walkthrough.
Yeah, I mean, I specifically remember the client that actually came to the closing and was like, it's not broom swept. I said, okay, what was left behind? He said, nothing. It's not broom swept.
There was some dog hair in a corner.
He actually thought it was broom swept meant like you have to sweep it. You don't really have to sweep it. so to speak. Broom swept really means that there's nothing in there. You don't have to clean the house out. Now, I've seen some where my clients actually hire a cleaning service, or where the buyer hires a, the seller's side hires a cleaning service for my buyer, but you don't have to. It's just a nice gesture that if you did that. But the walkthrough is really another area that I really don't enjoy in this practice, because it's very petty sometimes. It could be like, and sometimes it's really serious. I've had a deal where the entire crawl space was full of junk, and it was a big house. It was a lot of crawl space, and I had videos and photos of it, and this is years ago. And this is a deal where the seller's attorney came to the office and closed. And my clients were first-time home buyers, really distraught over this, because they had to get a dumpster and clean it out. It was a lot of stuff. And the basement too, as a matter of fact. So it was the crawl space in the basement was full of debris. And so the attorney came to the closing, and he basically was obnoxious. He was nasty. I don't remember who it was. I really don't. I wouldn't say his name if I did, but
he's on your blacklist.
Yeah, I just don't. He was just nasty. So what happened was we asked them to escrow $5,000 to get all this junk out, and we'll give you 30 days. That's like a lot of time. He called his client and was like, look, my client's not going to do anything. Take it or leave it. So I'm at the closing table with these poor first-time clients, first-time home buyers, and he had that decision to make. Most people are not going to not close on that day.
Right.
They're
all
99%
in.
All the chips got moved in already. They're all in. They can't really take the chips back. If they tried to take the chips back, it'd be a mess. The loan is already out. It's already cleared. The funds are already out. The title company.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It's a mess. So I asked him to, politely to step outside so I can talk to the clients. And I told them, like, there's nothing I could do except go after them, because contractually we have the language that says it's going to be broom swept. I also put in my riders, it's got the basement, the attic, no debris outside. So it clearly was in their favor as far as contract-wise. But what are our options? It's closing. If you want to sue them, spend thousands to sue them. Most people aren't going to take that, go the litigation route.
Yeah, because the time and money invested isn't worth the resolution.
It's really not. It's a few $1,000s. So they ended up closing. So walkthrough issues, sometimes the clients just call me on just really minor petty stuff. Like one had a little scratch in the kitchen cabinet. There was a scratch. I was like, what do you want?
There's a crayon.
$10? Yeah. How much do you want? What can I do for you?
Yeah.
It's a scratch. I know it's cosmetic at the end of the day. There's nothing wrong with the cabinet. I'm sorry it's scratched, but it's petty, like little handles, the kitchen, the knobs on the kitchen cabinets, stuff like that. And like, I got to take these calls. I went to law school for this. Sometimes I ask myself that. I went to law school. I should have probably got my plumbing license, my electrical license. I don't really need to be a lawyer sometimes.
Well, then you would still be dealing with the housing issues. You'd just be on another end of it.
I'm telling you, I hate the inspection stuff. It's just, sometimes it's like, come on, guys, really? And the thing that I do, or I don't do, is I don't really get into the inspection stuff with the clients. I don't want to give them the advice on what they should ask for, because that also gets tricky for us. Because if I may not think something is that bad, in my opinion, because at the end of the day, it's an opinion, what I think is you should ask for. And then let's say it ends up, when they move in, that one item that I said is not a big issue
turns into
one. Now they're like, oh, you should. So I always defer them back to the inspector. Have the conversation with your home inspector as to what you really should be focusing on. And my role here is to negotiate it for you, to get you to maximize whatever we can in the inspection contingency. So that the walkthrough stuff sometimes is pretty crazy, and it gets messy and very emotional too, because people are like, I'm moving into my house and this is what I get. And I try to calm them down. There's a sense of, a degree of psychiatry here, psychology, right? So I try to calm them down and remind them that, hey, these aren't really real problems that we have here. Like, you're still closing on your dream home.
It's just
take care of it. Just forget about it. Don't let this ruin the whole moment for you. And a lot of times they're like, you know what, you're right, and they move on, and we have a happy closing. Because I hate when they get here and they're really stressed out. It really bothers me, because this is your only time in your life you're going to be a first-time home buyer, and you don't want it to be a bad experience.
Right. They're already stressed because they're going through the loan process.
Yeah, it's a
they're
stressful
putting a
process.
huge mortgage out. You know, they're making a move for their family.
They're
oftentimes.
moving, and then, you know, moving is not easy.
Exactly.
And especially now with the COVID, the delays in deliveries and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
there are a lot of variables that
you
just
can't
give
even
everybody
arrange
anxiety.
to get things done. You want to get like cable in your house, and they're like 3 weeks out. You can't get internet in the home. You know what I mean? So there's a lot going on with a home purchase. So I try to hopefully make the experience a little more enjoyable as much as I possibly can.
All right, so we are in a seller's market. One of the problems that we are encountering a lot is, you know, sellers put their house on the market and then they have to go out and buy something. A lot of times we are writing offers for buyers with the expectation that there's going to be a use and occupancy agreement, or sometimes a delayed open-ended closing, because those sellers are trying to find their next place to live. I know use and occupancy agreements can get a little hairy. They're cause for pause and caution. What's your opinion on them, and tell us a bit about how they work?
Well, first, my opinion on it is really people have to be adults. That's where it starts. It's fine if people are adults. If people don't act like adults, it can be an absolute nightmare. So what we do, obviously, and for people that don't know what a use and occupancy is you're selling your home and you're occupying it after closing. So you stay and remain in possession for whatever, 30 days, 60 days. I've seen some, you know, 6-month use and occupancy agreements where the seller gets to stay in the home for 6 months after they close. And so it could get really sticky because it's your home really, but you don't own it anymore for the first time. And you're not even a renter, so to speak, because it's not like a tenant situation. You have less rights than a tenant because landlord-tenant laws protect tenants a lot more than you know, a licensee. You're just authorized to be on my property for a set number of days. So we're negotiating for them to cover the carrying costs of the buyer, so the buyer is not penalized by this. Sometimes we're letting them stay for free. If it's a short term, 30, 60 days, the buyers are saying, hey, stay in the home. I'll give you the 2 months for free. You don't even have to pay me. Just you know, keep paying the utilities and whatnot, and then, you know, we'll hold some money back. And that's where it gets really sticky too, with how much money are we holding. So me as the buyer's attorney in a use and occupancy, I have to protect against the seller not getting out of the house. Because if they don't, it's not like you can go to the house and say, you know, get out, or else I'm going to kick your ass, excuse my language. But you can't do that. No. So you have to go through the courts. And that can take
months.
Forever. Yeah. And so if they're there months after, how much money do we need to have to protect? So sellers don't want you to hold, you know, $30,000 on a use and occupancy. I have one that I'm closing. Well, it was supposed to close on Monday. We were negotiating a use and occupancy. It's a $3 million purchase. And so the attorney was like, well, yeah, we'll offer $5,000. I'm like, this is a $3 million house.
Yeah, that's not enough.
You're paying
that's not even covering a month.
You're paying $550 a day to stay there. I have to have at least $25,000 in escrow. So it kind of like messed it up. And then so I spoke to the client and the agent, and we ended up working out extending the interest rate for 2.5 more weeks, just so we don't have to have a use and occupancy scenario, because they couldn't work out the terms.
So if you're able to delay the closing with the lender,
absolutely,
then you're absolving that.
I never want to deal with that because it can go bad. Most of the time it doesn't go bad. And I could tell you, I do a ton of these since COVID. Yeah. Because people really can't find a place to go.
Yeah, it's been tough.
It's been tough, you know. I mean, it's funny. My next door neighbor sold his house for $400,000 more than what he bought it for in August of 21.
Wow.
And didn't put any money into it. So naturally, I was like, that's a lot of money to go up that quickly. Let's see. So I started thinking about my house, and this weekend we went and looked at homes in a certain area here in Bergen County, and nothing. Yeah. There was nothing. I was like, we can't sell until we know what we can. We're not going to go in contract and then hope to find something. Yeah. This is not a hope to find something market.
It's a catch-22 because especially if you need a mortgage to go, you need a mortgage on your house to go shopping, you know, for the next one. You need that home sale contingency. you really can't put any offers on the next property until yours is under contract. No listing agent or attorney is going to
don't
accept
want to
that.
deal with that. But more importantly is, I don't want to go under contract and then have to try to find something.
And be in that position where you have to uproot your family and then you're settling for something you don't necessarily want. And you may be paying more for it because you need to get out.
For sure. So it's a lot of sellers in the same situation. So one of the things, like you said, is they're doing the use and occupancy, giving the sellers a little more time to get out. It's always a good thing when you put it in your offer.
Yeah, and one thing that I've seen a lot of listing agents do, you know, when we look at listings on the MLS, is it'll say contingent upon the seller finding a home. And when we're in that situation, it's like, you know, how long do we need to put a rate lock on this mortgage for? Because are we talking about 2 months? Are we talking about 6 months? How open-ended is this transaction going to be?
Right. Well, I mean, with the UNO, which is what we call the use and occupancy, the UNO, you close, that way the rate lock is, is covered. You don't have to worry about. That's the reason why, one of the reasons why you close and then give them the extra time. But like you said, it's not easy, and it could go bad. So I don't like it because it's extra work, and I actually charge people for it because it is extra work. People just think, I have to whip up an agreement. I'm not making it from scratch, obviously. I have a template that I use, but I still have to
and you're
work
doing
on
an
the details. I have
negotiation and follow up.
More negotiation. I have to cut checks. I don't like cutting checks. I wish I could Zelle people, but I can't because
petition the legal system for
I
Zelle.
can't. Yeah, we have to cut checks and mail checks, and I have to do a trust accounting. It's a lot of work. The trust account is so much work. I've had 2 audits already in my trust account, and the first audit was really tough. It was like several months of auditing, and it was all about how I kept my records, which, when you open your own practice, you don't always know everything you need to do.
Right, you're a small business
owner.
Yeah,
you're kind of learning as you go. So she kicked my tail with the way I knew where all the money was, and she saw that all the money was where it's supposed to be. I didn't steal any money, because ultimately that's what they're really trying to find out, because attorneys do steal money out of the trust account. They do borrow money out of the trust account. It's a crime to do that. So she obviously saw that that wasn't the case, but my record keeping, she killed me on it because I didn't have and now I know how to do it. I do it myself because I'm so hands-on. And I could pay an accountant to do it, and my accountant's fantastic. I love them, but I need to know what's going on. I cannot not
because your license is hanging on it.
I can't know where the money is. I can't not know where the money is. So I work a lot on my trust accounting. If I cut a check, I have 4 different things where I put the information in from one check. It goes into 4 different spreadsheets.
I'm gonna have you track my finances from now on because you're much more thorough.
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm just talking about the trust account. My business account.
It's another story.
Yeah. My personal accounts, it's just in and out. It's
all Zelle.
Yeah. It's in and out. But yeah, so UNOs, I mean, they're there for a reason, and they're resourceful. It's a smart tactic for a buyer to give the seller extra time to get out and find a place. But it can get messy for us attorneys. And it has, on their way out, they damage something, or they overstayed and you have to get into the penalty. So if there's a holdover fee usually built into the UNO, where if they stay past the 30 days or whatever number of days, there's an extra 200, 300, whatever it is a day, and then people freak out. Like, it's right in the contract,
Thanks for joining us today. I hope that you learned some great information about the real estate transaction process and the caveats that you need to watch out for when you're in a transaction. Maimoon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Always hire an attorney when you're looking to purchase or sell real estate.
Yes.